When we look at the life of Paul and see him ending his days in a place like this, awaiting death, it's quite easy for comfortable Western Christians today to imagine, well, that's then. Paul was always getting into trouble. He was a cantankerous individual. He probably provoked half of it. And so for us, it's perfectly okay to be comfortable with our faith and not to expect anything bad to happen. And when we look around the world and we hear stories of Christians in other parts of the world being persecuted, being killed for their faith, losing their jobs, their homes, being separated from their families, it's easy for comfortable Westerners again to think, well, that's just a glitch which is happening over there. But when we read the New Testament, it's clear that Paul himself knew that this wasn't just specific to him. He says to the Thessalonians, I told you when I was with you that we're going to get trouble, we're going to get persecution. And so now that it's happening to you as well as to me, I want you to hang in there and realize that this is the norm rather than the exception. Because from Paul's point of view, the church is always called to live counterculturally. And that challenge will present itself differently in every generation. And so in Romans 8, one of the greatest chapters he ever wrote, he talks about this wonderful picture of the new Exodus being led by the Spirit to the inheritance, which is the whole renewed and redeemed creation. And he says, this will be ours if we suffer with the Messiah in order that we may also be glorified, be exalted with him. In other words, this is how it looks because this is how it looked for Jesus. For Jesus, in Mark chapter 10, when James and John wanted to sit at his right hand and his left, he says, listen, the rulers of the world do it that way. They boss and bully and lord it over people. We're going to do it the other way. The one who is to be great among you must be your servant. The one who's to be top will be the slave of all, because the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. In other words, the church is called always to do things upside down and inside out from the world's way, because God is renewing the world and is renewing creation. And those who are carrying the message, and we see this in books like 1 Peter, we see it in books like the Revelation of John, those who are called to carry this message are celebrating the new day, are celebrating the presence of the risen Jesus, but at the same time find themselves at the sharp edge, often the very painful, cutting edge of where the gospel challenges the world with a different way of going about everything. So the church in every generation has to learn to stand in fellowship with and in prayer for our brothers and sisters around the world who are suffering exactly what Paul said, exactly what Peter said, exactly what Jesus said would actually happen. And those of us who may not be suffering that at the moment have to be in solidarity with them, remembering them, sharing in the gospel with them, sharing in the resources as best we can. And Paul speaks about that too. He talks about the koinonia, the fellowship of his sufferings. And he says, that's what I'm going through, and I want to know the Messiah and that fellowship, so that then at last I may attain the resurrection of the dead.